Hi, thank you for joining me today. I thought what we would talk about today is something that nobody ever wants to talk about and none of us want to experience, but it's something that is a part of the whole collective experience that we experience as human beings, and that is grief and loss and sadness. And the subject is obviously broad and wide and got all kinds of layers. So I want to be clear that I'm not going to make a dent in that. And it's not going to be complete what I talk about. I thought I would just share a little bit of some things that have been helpful for me and just some kind of understanding and ways to handle that. And then I thought we could go through the stages of grief as it relates to what we're experiencing in this world right now with the pandemic. So, you know, loss is a part of life, and when you're in acute loss, there is a lot of different advice and a lot of different things that people will say. And what I really want to give you permission to is that there are no real rules of how long it takes you to get over something or what you need to do to get over. When I was kind of thinking about this subject, I thought about years and years ago when I met my now former husband. He lost basically his mother was a single mother, and she died in a car accident when he was 12. And he said that I was one of the few people that didn't try to say, oh, things happen for a reason, or there must be some reason for it, and was able to just sort of sit with him with that and acknowledge that profound loss that he had. And I think in a way that's the best that we can do for ourselves. Now, sometimes if you are, dealing with something specific, that there can be a lot of healing with finding a group that might be dealing with the same kind of loss that you're dealing with. While we all experience loss at different levels, sometimes it feels unfair, or if somebody says, oh, I know what you're feeling, and there's a part of you that's just like angry, and it's like, no, you don't. And there is some truth to that. There's a lot to be learned, not only if we're dealing with our own grief, but if we have people in our lives that are dealing with that, and a lot to learn around that. Most of us, I think, go in with a good intention around that, but can frequently say the wrong thing or upset somebody, unknowingly. I'm dealing with grief right now. My mother is, right now, as we're speaking, they're having a meeting, and she will probably be going into hospice soon. A kind of expected, somewhat necessary part of life that's no fun having to go through. And then I also have a dear friend who's having brain surgery in a couple weeks. And to be honest, I can't even really go there with that. I can't really even think about, because I'm not really sure what that's going to be like. So sometimes our brains just won't even let us go there. Some of the, when we're going through a hard time, we tend to be drawn to our spiritual practice or religious teachings. I, many years ago, found a lot of comfort. This was something my mother exposed me a lot to, was some contemplative Christian writing by Joel Goldsmith. He wrote like in the 40s and 50s. But I found his work to be very healing, but not, and just a kind of understanding of the human experience. You've probably also heard me talk about Eckhart Tolle. That had a profound impact for me about 20 years ago when I was going through some significant loss. And then also a great book I read a handful of years ago was Pema Chodron's When Things Fall Apart, and she's written a couple of other really great books. She's a good writer, and she has a really unique perspective. She's one of the very few American-born Buddhist nuns. So she brings lovely Buddhist practice and understanding, but from an American perspective. And so you may find her work to be really helpful. And also you may have some good books that appeal to you and that you could share at the end of the talk. So I thought I would go through the stages of grief for the pandemic, since this is something that we are all experiencing together. Now, I'm going to go ahead and read or go through the stages of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Now, many of you probably know that she wrote this book in the late 60s, and it was really specifically around her work working with patients who were facing their mortality with illness. And so they were working through those stages of grief and loss and acceptance. And yet, there's probably some criticism, which I guess there is about everything. It has stood this test of time. And I think those stages are really informative that we go through. So I thought I would sort of apply that kind of principle to what we're going through and see if, invite you to notice where you are on those stages. One of the most important things to remember is that they're not linear. And so we're going to move through them and come and revisit them a lot at different stages. Okay, so that being said, so the first step is denial. And I think I can really relate to this one. So I remember my best friend lives up in the Portland area. And she tends to be a lot more nervous and fearful than I am. And I am a little bit more laid back. And we were on the phone, and so this must have been January or February, and she was getting on an airplane to take a short trip, and so there was some anxiety there. And she had, kind of the worst case scenario of what this pandemic was, and I was like, oh, in a couple months, this is going to be all better. And so both of us were wrong. And I had to sort of deal with my own denial around that and sort of like, is this like really real? And, our own ways of coping with it. So that you probably can relate to some different experiences that you had around that. So the next stage is anger, and I've added blame to it because I think that is a really big piece of what we're going through in our I would say our country and our world. So, anger is a really important step. And I think we went through and are still going through a lot of that, because for me, what I have noticed in talking to people and just my perspective is I think going through something like this that is so unprecedented is that we're getting in touch with the idea that there isn't really a grown-up taking care of us or in charge. And I notice people will write things like on the internet or on Facebook, like, why won't they tell us what's going on? And I'm like, it's unfolding in real time. There isn't really anything to tell us. And I think that's what brings up so much fear and so much anxiety, and why there is so much misinformation, because there's tends to be, and there's certain personality types that, want to be told what to do and just, give me the rules and I will follow them. And this coronavirus is not playing by the rules, and it's causing a tremendous amount of fear and chaos. And I think it's very normal during this stage of anger and blame to want to blame somebody. And, why can't they figure out a vaccine, or why can't they figure out a treatment? And I think if you talk to people on the front lines, I mean, these are our heroes that are working so hard and trying everything. And yet there aren't still easy answers. Happily, the vast majority of people survive it and have mild symptoms, but there's a little bit of a Russian roulette to what we're going through. Do we want to be the ones that get somebody close to us sick? Of course not. The other thing, to think about is, I personally, I have people in my life that would be very in the high risk group. So I have stayed relatively safe and cautious. Um, but they're starting to see what they call, right now they're calling it kind of long haulers, people who get it and may have not even gone to the hospital, but then the symptoms just go on and on and on. And anybody who's had chronic illnesses tends to fall in that category. So that scares me to death. So that's sort of what keeps me on the straight and narrow most of the time. I think because we've had it now, I thought we'd be long gone, back, or that was my sort of optimistic temperament. So then we move into the next stage, which is bargaining. And I think this is such an interesting one. It's like, what is going to be an acceptable risk for this? Like, can I go out, for my birthday? I also had another tremendous surprising loss. This lovely husband of a dear friend of mine died from a heart attack and brain bleed. Just went out for a jog and didn't come back. And we were unable to have a service for him. There was a dinner party that they kind of did, and we elected not to go. I have gone to see her individually and hug her. And, I've gone to see family. So I feel like there is a lot of that bargaining. Like, is this a risk that I could take to go do something and meet somebody outside, or if a crisis happens, it's like all things go out the window. My family's from Southern Oregon, and they had the tremendous fires, and my brother was left to go to work and wasn't able to get back into his house. Well, he works in healthcare, and so we've kind of had him staying away from my elderly father, and he'd drop off things and come and do the garbage and stuff, but have been pretty good about staying away. Well, then all bets are off because he had to go live with my dad. He was sent away from his house for like 10 days, not knowing if he had a home to go to. Thank goodness, this is my 2020 miracle that his apartment building survived. So he's back into his place. But so there's a good example of, good intentions go out the window, and we need to give ourselves grace around that and make appropriate decisions for, what we need to do in our lives, and be, it's scary. I don't have an easy answer for that. Because we're all figuring this out in real time. The next stage that she talked about is depression. Well, I think depression is one that you're going to like move in and out through. I have found myself in and out through depression in the last, since this broke out. And of course, as you can see, I have other things going on too that are happening. So not just dealing, and I'm sure you are the same. And so I'm struggling with that one again. I mean, it just sort of comes up, and what I love about the work that we're doing with our brain retraining is just sort of allowing that to be, and noticing it, and caring for ourselves, and however that might be, and knowing that it will pass. That depression isn't here to stay. It will move through. And then the last stage that she talks about is acceptance. And acceptance has become one of my favorite words. And yet there was a time in my life where I absolutely couldn't go there. I mean, there were some things in my life that I kind of needed to accept, and it just felt, unacceptable. I'm pretty sure it was Eckhart Tolle's work, or maybe listening to something he said, where he said, "Can you accept the unacceptable?" And it was like, oh, there is some space there. So, because there are certain things in life that just don't feel acceptable, or don't feel like not something I want. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to have to deal with this. So maybe if you're dealing with something like that, just bringing a little bit of spacious in. And I thought I would actually read a little something, because I have had many people buck at me saying the word acceptance because it feels like giving up. And so here's another perspective about that I hope you might like. It's just really short. On the surface, acceptance looks like a passive state, but in reality, it is active and creative because it brings something entirely new into this world. That peace, that subtle energy vibration, is consciousness. And one of the ways in which it enters this world is through surrendered action, one aspect of which is acceptance. So see if there is some, ability to kind of accept where we are. I'm really fascinated to see going, further down, what kinds of things are, I fully believe we're going to get back to some level of normal. There may be a new level of normal, and there may be, things that have stayed the same. Like, will we still handshake? Will we still hug? I don't know. I hope so. Another thing, another example of the way that we may, reach acceptance and then go back through like to the bargaining stage is we're coming up on Thanksgiving. What are we going to do about that? What's a reasonable risk? What should we do? So see that we're going to be moving through those, and anger and blame. Why can't somebody figure something out? Why can't somebody be in charge? So we need to just show a lot of compassion for ourselves around how we're going to move through those stages. I think about this a lot. I don't know how real this is, but every time I fly, we still take off our shoes at the airport. And to my knowledge, the only reason why we do it is because there was a failed shoe bomb attempt like 20 years ago, or maybe a little bit less. And we still do that. And can't we come up with a way for, if there was that, for that to go through, so we don't have to take our shoes off, which I find really unappealing. And so I've had this conversation with friends, like, I wonder which pieces of what we're going through, I should say, will stay. So I'd be curious to hear if you guys have had those conversations and what you think might, like, I'm guessing like the plexiglass in the grocery store will probably stay up for a long time, and the bank, and the bank's probably always been there, but the post office, and what things would you miss? What things might be different? So I thought I would open it up to see if there was any other comments about this, or anything you're thinking about doing as you're going through the stages. So does anybody have anything they'd like to share? You can raise your hand. Anything about ways in which you've handled acceptance? I think that's a really big, heavy one to think about. Okay. I saw something, and then probably I miss the concerts and the holiday craft festivals. I know. I miss them too. I was just having this conversation with somebody who plays in a band, and that was one of my favorite summer things around here are the summer music festivals. And I had hoped to go up to the Brit Festival up in Medford. So yeah, a lot of grieving about that. And I hadn't even thought about the craft festivals. Yeah, it is. So just kind of holding on to that hope that a year from now or next year, again, the optimist, I really feel like we'll be able to do these things again, and just finding ways to comfort ourselves. Thanks for sharing that, because I think it's a big loss. And I'm curious what people are doing about holidays. Have you guys had conversations with your family yet around that? And what you're going to do? I mean, if you have elderly parents, do you go visit them? We're so lucky in California. talking to a lot of my friends in the Pacific Northwest, further up in Portland area, when the weather turns cold, what are we going to do? I think one thing that I know a lot of people are doing is sort of having like longer stays. So, waiting, if you were around somebody, wait a couple weeks and then come up. So I know a friend is having her mom stay up for a month, and, they're agreeing to, all be safe together. So I think there's a lot of creative ways that we can share that and have pandemic buddies and cohorts. I know of some that did that early on with their kids in school. They found a teacher that was willing to, so they had like 5 families and they all agreed that they would share each other's space with the kids. And it's worked out really well. I mean, they were lucky to find a teacher to do that and have their own little pod of learning. A lot of creative things that are coming out of this grief and loss. So anybody else have anything they want to share, or things that they miss and are grieving and looking forward to? So I know that has been a big one. Our supper club, I had a supper club that we had theme parties, and that had been a big part of my life for quite a few years. And we also had some deaths and some people moving. So I'm probably letting go of that too. So that's been a big one. And I know some of you have had similar ones. So, okay, well, thanks again for showing up. And I just want to say, wherever you are and whatever you're going through, that my heart is with you, and find ways that you can take care of yourself and ways to support yourself, and that you're not doing anything wrong if you're feeling sorry for yourself or feeling sad or just grieving the loss of some of those things that we have taken for granted. And so take care, and I will look forward to seeing you next month, okay?